Okay, so we're gonna go through and talk about how to make Excel, put our chi-squared, take our data and create a chi-squared table, doing all the calculations kind of quote unquote by hand, because we're not just relying on a calculator to just tell us what the chi-squared value is. We're actually showing the math that goes into creating that chi-squared value. Doing it in Excel makes it super easy because we would use lots of formulas and make sure that everything fits the right way. So that it's easy to show that I can have the calculations all done, again, quote unquote, by hand. So I'm not writing them down and actually physically doing them by doing all the math without a calculator. So Excel is great. It does lots of awesome things. Here's what you should do before you get involved in this. We have to decide what we're going to categorize things as. For a lot of you with a chi-squared, you're going to have categories such as maybe male and female, and if you're doing favorite genre of music, you might have pop, rock, and rap or something. Those are easy, okay? If you have things where you're going to have to do a range, like my project, I'm going to talk about that right now. So here's my data. I had to randomly sample it. A lot of you probably did not, so I randomly sampled it. But here's my data that I'm going to use for my project. I've got the gender, the age, the number of pairs of shoes. For this project that I'm showing you with a chi-squared, I'm just using gender and numbers of pairs of shoes. Okay, so gender is easy. You're either male or female. But the number of pairs of shoes, I'm going to have a range for my numbers of pairs of shoes. I'm going to have to categorize them. I would suggest trying to have no more than 3 or 4 categories on either direction. All right, so a 4x4 table, and what I mean by that is I'm going to create an observed frequency table here. I have 3 ranges for pairs of shoes, and then obviously 2 genders. The bigger your table gets, the not necessarily more complicated it is, because we're going to have Excel do everything, but it becomes possible that you're going to have expected frequencies under 5, which we can't have, because that makes the chi-squared not really work out correctly. So more categories is bad, but if you have not many categories, that's also bad, because it's going to come out to be independent every time. So I suggest that you have either, I like 2x3 tables work really well. 3x3 tables are great. I would not suggest getting above a 3x4 table. All right, 4x4 tables start to become a little bit crazy, okay, because that's a lot of places, all right, and a lot easier to get things expected frequencies under 5. And if you get expected frequencies under 5, we have to do some combining, so we don't want to do that. All right, so I settled on categories of 1 to 3, 4 to 7, and 8 over. How did I do that? I just basically looked at the data, and most everything's under 10 or under. So I was originally going to do 1 to 4, 5 to 8, and then 10 or over. Your ranges do not have to be equal. Okay, you could have 1 and 2, 3 to 7, and 9 and over. Okay, it depends on what you want to do to explain why you picked those. Okay, my explanation would be the most of the data was 10 or under, so I wanted to make sure that I had things kind of equally spread out among those topics. Or I could say, 1 to 3 is not very many pairs of shoes, in my opinion. 4 to 7 is kind of a medium number of pairs of shoes, and 8 or more is a lot of shoes to own. Okay, now I don't actually believe that, because I own about 30 pairs of shoes. So to me, anything over 50 is excessive. All right, so tally it by hand is probably easier for most of you. I am going to show you how I made Excel tally these things. Okay, but you want to go through and tally all the males and females that fall into these categories. Please be careful. All right, it's incredibly frustrating to go back through and do it again. All right, when it doesn't work out. Okay, and you can't have an error in there. So I'm going to redo this one right here just to show you. All right, how do I make Excel count? All right, well, it'll count things. It'll look for stuff and count things. So mine is more complicated than a lot of yours will probably be. I can show you how to make one of them if you want. You don't want to tally it by hand. So to make Excel count things, I want to hit this little f of x, which means put a function in there. And then there's 2 count functions. Well, there's more than 2 count functions there, but the 2 that I want to use are either count if or count ifs. All right, and most of you want to use count ifs because we're going to have to count more than one thing to go to these categories. So I'm going to hit count ifs. It'll bring up this thing. Criteria range means where do I want it to look. So first thing I want it to do is count male. All right, I want it to count out all the males. So I go to the sample data, and I tell it that I want it to look in this column right here. So that column, so I drag it down, and I want it to look for M's. Now, this only works if you have your data entered really well. So I want it to look for M's, okay? And it tells me right here, you can see there's 53 males, okay? 53 males, which you can see in my table is how many I ended up with when I had to count the males. Okay, but now I need it to count the males that are between 1 and 3. This is a little tricky, all right? If it just was count the males that like pop music, I could then tell this thing where I want it to look, and to count pop, it would look for both of those things and tell me. All right, I need it to look in this column right here, the number of pairs of shoes, and I can drag from the bottom up, it doesn't care. All right, number of pairs of shoes, and I need it to look for ones that are between 1 and 3. So I want it to be bigger than or equal to 3. Or sorry, bigger than or equal to 1, because I want it bigger than 1. But then I want it to be, I gotta put 3 in here, because right now it's counting everybody, because everybody has 1 or more. I want it to stop at 3. So I'm gonna go back to sample data. I'm gonna get the column where it tells me how many pairs of shoes. And I'm going to make sure I get the right thing. And this took me a minute ago when I was trial running this. I gotta click the down arrow so I can go down there to the little scroll bar here. And I want it to look for things that are less than or equal to 3. All right, so it's now going to look for males. Sorry, let me scroll up here. It's going to look for males that are number of pair of shoes that are bigger than 1, bigger than or equal to 1, but less than or equal to 3. And I hit OK, and it tells me there's 10 of them. Okay, so I went through very carefully and did that for each one of these, had it look for males and put everything in there. Okay, and then what I can do here, and this is where even if you did it by hand, you'll want to be able to do this. So you'll fill your numbers in. I want it to count these things. I don't want to have to do, I'm going to delete this one too and show you. I want it to count these things for me, add them. I don't want to have to add them. So I'm just going to type in equals, and then SUM tells it to add things, parenthesis, and then I just tell it what range I want it to add. I want it to add those 2 things, and I hit 10, and it adds 21, and I can easily see that it's 21. Do that for each one of these, or say this one right here. I go equals SUM, and I can do sideways ranges. So I hold down and drag like that, and it counts that for me. And then this last spot, the grand total, I'm going to hit equals SUM, and I can either tally these 2 or I can tally these 3. It doesn't matter. So I'm just going to do these 2. If you want to double check to make sure that everything adds up, I can do equal SUM. I can do this and make sure it's 100. Right, they're both 100, so I'm covered. So now my observed frequency table is done. Make sure it's labeled really well. I'm going to center these. Okay, and then I'm also going to do this. I'm going to highlight the table. I'm going to right click on it and click Format Cells. I'm going to go to Border. And I'm going to tell it to put an outline and an inside so that my table then has grid lines in it. Okay, so you can see that it's dark outline now. So that way when I screen clip it, it's going to look good on my project. I'm also going to do this right now because I should have done this before. I'm going to insert a column here to move this over so that when I do screen clip it, I can get that in there. So if you have already done that, just what I did, let me go back. Let me undo and show that again. I don't want it to be tight up to this edge here. So I just highlighted column A, right clicked on it, and just clicked insert. And it moved everything over one spot. So that's how to get your observed frequency table.